You're listening to a 3CR podcast created in the studios of independent community radio station 3CR in Melbourne, Australia. For more information, go to allthews.3cr.org.au.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Good morning, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Palestine Remembered. Unbelievably, we're still going. 17th of August, 313 days, I think. Unrestrained hate, unchecked by the world, that remains sycophantic and complicit in a genocide. The reality of genocide is, as a legal definition, as a legal term, what it needs a legal court to find it as an actual fact. And at some point, as they did with Rwanda, as they did in Bosnia, some years later, a court said that was genocide. Rearview mirror stuff. We know that no genocide has ever been documented as well as this. This is a live, digital, 4K genocide. The UN warned in November that there was a chance of. In January, the International Court of Justice ruled a plausible chance of genocide. Australia's own Hilary Charlesworth on that court wrote an opinion that was very damning. A plausible case of genocide. From that point of view, from that time, we've had Francesca Albanese say so. We've had Chris Sidoti, a former Australian Human Rights Commissioner, say that he's got 7,000 pieces of independent, verifiable pieces of evidence that suggest war crimes and crimes against humanity. Over 7,000 pieces. The International Criminal Court ruled that the occupation must end, is illegal, that Gaza is occupied, that the settlements have to be taken down, settlers have to be removed. Every single piece of legal paperwork and ruling that is required for governments to abandon this racist settler colony, this apartheid genocidal project that is the State of Israel. Yet, so many countries are failing in their obligations as signatories to the Rome Statute that clearly say, that clearly articulate that they must do everything within their power to make sure they are not complicit in genocide. And that includes everything from war componentry to supplying of weaponry to governmental support, abstaining at the UN or not voting. And I would argue it extends to the responsibility to intervene. There is no question. We're beyond that point where we've been calling for ceasefires and calling for restraint. We've had a couple of condemnations from our foreign minister over particular instances of brutal horror. But we have not done enough. And Australia continues to hide behind this concept that we're a small power. What can we do half a world away? Well, what we can do is what we're obliged to do as signatories on the Rome Statute. What we can do is what we're obliged to do as global citizens. What we can do is what is right. And everything that we can do within our remit is what we should be doing, which includes no less than, and as a minimum, immediately recalling our ambassador, expelling the Israeli ambassador, placing sanctions not on half a dozen messianic nut job settlers and a youth hilltop movement, but on the entire Netanyahu cabinet and ministers. We have the legislation, the Magnitsky Act, that allows for sanctioning. We've got 1,200 sanctions against Russia, over 500 against I think it's Syria and Iran and North Korea. We can do the same against this rogue apartheid state. And it's in that space, that equivocation of humanity, that we've really seen an explosion of anti-Palestinian racism, a real explosion. And that creates the space where Peter Dutton can actually unload, as he has done for this past week. He can unload in a vacuum that John Howard created, that allowed for Pauline Hanson to emerge. We've got a space now where Peter Dutton can use the vilification of Palestinians who are suffering a Nakba, a genocide, to other us for cheap domestic political points. The suffering of a people just being brutalized to try and score some cheap domestic points. You know, I had one of these coalition people tell me international considerations will never trump domestic political considerations. So it doesn't matter what's happening overseas. If we can score a point locally, then we'll do it. And I said to this coalition former minister, shadow cabinet guy, I said, but you know, we're human beings. When you say this stuff, it hurts. It hurts. Cold grey eyes looked back, and there was no movement. And this guy's got form, Peter Dutton. You know, he's not our mate. He's not the mate of an Australia that we dream of, a decolonised Australia with equality for all, irrespective of colour, religion, ethnicity, but also a country that gives land back, a country that acknowledges the genocide here, that's 239 years old, that's ongoing, that it looks like youth incarceration, it looks like children still being taken away from their families, it's about language being stolen, it's about our current premier backtracking on raising the age of criminal responsibility. This guy has got a lot of form, and we know there's some stories out there about his time as a police officer, but it's as simple as in 2008 when he walked out on the apology for the stolen generation. 15 years later, he apologised. It took him 15 years to work out. But it still didn't stop him from doing everything he could to make the debate around the voice as racist and as isolationist as possible. In 2016, he declared that the government did the wrong thing by letting in Lebanese Muslims, fleeing a civil war. In 2018, he fed into the nasty division that was happening around here, around African crime gangs. And he said, Melburnians were too scared to go out and get dinner. Earlier this year, when the Muslim community was agitating about how they weren't being represented in safe Labor seats that have taken for granted that quote-unquote brown vote, that Muslim vote, that Arab vote, who aren't Muslim but are Christian or other denominations of Arabs, that they aren't representing that constituency, he said that the prospect of a Muslim campaign that might see the Labor government be put into minority, he said the next Labor government in minority would include a crossbench that would include Muslim candidates from Western Sydney, and it will be a disaster. It will be a disaster. You know what is a disaster, Pete? What is a disaster is you not realising that when you're talking about Palestinians, we understand you're talking about us. And when I say we are all the others, Peter. We are all the others. Now, a lot of Australia looks like you, and perhaps a lot of Australia thinks like you and wants to vote like you. But there's a lot of Australia that doesn't look like you. And when you say we, or you're pointing out they don't belong, they shouldn't get here, we don't want any more of them. We're Sudanese. We're Vietnamese. We're West Papuan. We're Kurds. We're Greek. We're Chinese. We're Bosnians. We're the 100+ other people on this country, on this continent, all as settlers that have made it what it is today. So I'd urge you to get your mouth out of the gutter and speak to a better country, to a better world. And you can start with Palestine. Palestine will free you as it will free everybody else. But that space of anti-Palestinian racism, where it's so easy to kick a Palestinian, so easy to punch down on Palestinians, is rapidly diminishing. Nowhere near fast enough, and it's not going to be fast enough to stop this genocide, but it's going to be fast enough to see the end of this apartheid, genocidal, racist regime that is Israel. Its most recent manifestation was the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, when Jason Gilham decided to play a piece called Witness, written in dedication to the Palestinian journalists who have been assassinated, murdered, targeted to silence Palestinian voices out of Gaza. When he played that piece and introduced it with barely a minute worth of introduction, the MSO immediately came out, cancelled his next concert, and issued the most sycophantic pandering of notices about no politics in art, and that sort of really disgusting narrative. To his great credit, Jason doubled down. He said, "No, I'm not. I won't be cowed-toed." He pushed back. The MSO then cancelled the concert that was supposed to be played with Jason, and on Thursday they cited security concerns. This is straight out of the Zionist playbook. We did something ethical, and now we don't feel safe. Full white woman tears by the MSO. And it's a lie. They cancelled because so many subscribers wrote in. They cancelled because the orchestra themselves wrote in and put in a no confidence motion. The board is going to be investigating, and that space where Zionists could just have stuff finished and knocked over is gone. We saw it in the State Library of Victoria, where they've been lambasted. Nobody's feeling comfortable in there. That space will be reclaimed for humanity. We saw it in the Sydney Museum when Zionists complained about an Egyptian mummy, and the plaque said Palestine. Well, at the time that mummy was interned, it was Palestine. It was historically Palestine. But they pandered and they took Palestine off, and we ran a campaign and Palestine got re-put there. That space where Zionists could just cancel us and nobody would even know. We would just scream into an echo chamber saying, no, has gone. And to Jason's great credit, the reality of art is it's supposed to challenge. Art is supposed to push boundaries. It can be Pablo Picasso's Guernica, the most magnificent painting that speaks about the Spanish Civil War and the pain of German bombing and in the Basque region, etc. That painting disturbed. Art is supposed to disturb. If you just want to be entertained, you can just turn on your video or your CD player or your podcasts or whatever it might be. But art is supposed to challenge. So good on you, Jason, and well done. And here to the end of Zionist omnipotence and the loss of that space where they can control the narrative. I'm going to play a couple of community announcements and a song, and after that I'm going to talk to you about the Anti-Palestinian Racism report that we've just launched. So stay tuned.
The biggest weapons fair in the Southern Hemisphere is coming to Naarm. Land forces will run at the Melbourne Convention Centre. All arms dealers will be there. So will we. From the 8th to the 14th of September, we are mobilising to disrupt land forces. This is where the generals, weapons CEOs, diplomats and defence ministers come together to do the deals that end in genocide. We plan to shut that shit down. Albert, Lockheed, Hanwha, Boeing, Thales, Naya, the biggest weapon makers in the world, will be there to grab their piece of the genocide pie. Join the collaboration to disrupt land forces. We support all cultures, genders, ages, ability and protest styles. Connect with us. DisruptLandForces.org. Join the mobilisation from the 8th to the 14th of September to stop arming Israel and put a stop to this genocide shock. Disrupt Land Forces is a 3CR supporter.
Come to the Renters and Housing Union Anti-Eviction Fundraiser Show. See Mud Rat, Red Hell, Double Doll String Band, Marushti and Ollie Express, Sean Vate and Purple Pingers, including a raffle with huge prizes at Thornbury Bowls Club, Saturday, 24th of August. Search Evict the Evictors Humanitics. Rahu is a 3CR supporter.
Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. No more murder, no more lies. No more murder, no more lies. Free, free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine.
Stand up tall, this is a wake-up call. Never again means never again for all. To all my people in Gaza, even though we're living far from each other, your pain is my own pain. All for one and one for all. Free, free Palestine. Free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. No more murder, no more lies. No more murder, no more lies. Free, free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestina. Palestina. Oh, Palestine in my heart. Palestina. Palestina. Oh, Palestine in my heart. Freedom is our destiny. You gotta make a choice, better be on the right side of history. No one can be free until we all are free. Enough is enough. We gotta stop this genocide. Free, free Palestine. Free, free, free Palestine. No more murder, no more lies. Free, free, free Palestine. Palestina. Palestina. Oh, Palestine in my heart. Palestina. Palestina. Oh, Palestine in my heart. Palestina. Palestina. Oh, Palestine in my heart. Palestine.
That's Free Palestine by Meher Zain. Listeners, it is the 17th of August, 313 days into this genocide, and we've been talking about anti-Palestinian racism. This week, the Australian Muslim Advocacy Network, an APAN, released an anti-Palestinian racism report, and AMAN did a whole bunch of work going through, we're going to call them Jewish Facebook groups, but that's how they self-identify, but they're not Jewish in the sense, you know, when we're talking about our Jewish allies, they are Zionist Facebook groups. And they broke down the commentary and the hate within those spaces, the Nakba denial and the real alternative universe, the real bizarro universe where Superman is the bad guy. I can tell you that if you go onto the APAN website and look for the report, a lot of screenshots, so it's pretty easy to digest. It will hurt your head a little bit. It will hurt your head a little bit that we are walking the streets with people who think like this. But some of the key points that anti-Palestinian racism is a subset. You know, it sits When you think about what the federal government tried to do in November by introducing $50 million, $25 million to our Jewish community and $25 million to the Australian Arab and Muslim community. Later on, they added Palestinian. Anti-Palestinian racism is not Islamophobia. You don't have to be Palestinian to suffer anti-Palestinian racism. Jason Gilham got a concert cancelled because he stood in solidarity with Palestinians. He didn't do anything like wear a keffiyeh. He didn't jump up and say, from the river to the sea. All he did was play a piece of music, a 5-minute piece of music, that was dedicated to Palestinian journalists that have been targeted and assassinated by the genocidal, apartheid, racist Israeli regime. A 45-second introduction where he spoke about shaheed and where it means and witness and its derivative into martyr. And from there, he gets a contract cancelled. Makes global news. The cancel culture on full display in a massive, massive display of anti-Palestinian racism. Yet he's the whitest guy you ever might meet. Born in the UK, Jason Gilham. He's so white he spells Jason with a Y. You know, you get really funky when you're Jackson with an X, or, you know, you're just next level white. And he suffered from anti-Palestinian racism. So anti-Palestinian racism is, and some of it might intersect with Islamophobia, but you can suffer anti-Palestinian racism in a space of anti-Semitism. Our Jewish allies who suffer because of their stand in support of Palestine are suffering anti-Palestinian racism. They might get some disturbingly sickening comment about their Judaism and their stance on Palestine, so the anti-Semitism and the anti-Palestinian racism sit together, but they're not. They don't actually sit as Islamophobia, which is why it's so important that it gets taken apart. And during the week I was on the ABC radio with Raf Epstein, and he spoke about Jill Segal, who is the anti-Semitism envoy, who has been, until she was appointed the anti-Semitism envoy, she was the CEO or president of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, and she has advocated for no ceasefire. She has advocated for Israel to continue the bombing. She advocated that I shouldn't be allowed to be on Q&A, silencing Palestinian voices. She's been strong in condemnation against some of the statements Penny Wong's made, as we have been. But she's condemned Penny Wong for being too strong. Now, she became the anti-Semitism envoy. That's how well we're going in Australia, that this woman is the anti-Semitism envoy. Raf Epstein said to me, well, you know, the government, to be fair, the government has said that they're going to appoint an Islamophobia envoy. And I had to make it clear to him that anti-Palestinian racism is not about Islamophobia. And one might wonder why it's taken so long to find a Muslim who wants to fulfill this role. That's a really big question that should be answered. Anyway, a bit more on what anti-Palestinian racism is for our friends who might be listening to this show for the first time, but please feel free to, and we'd encourage you to share the podcast. Anti-Palestinian racism is an alarming form of racism that can't be ignored or subsumed into the Islamophobia narrative. It impacts Palestinians and its allies. It's been used at the highest level, from peak lobby groups, political officers, to communities, to shut down legitimate public objections to Israel's genocide. So it was anti-Palestinian racism that saw the State Library cancel that writers' workshop. They trawled the social media accounts of those writers that they had been engaged and went, it's not going to be safe. Importantly, the report makes key recommendations that should be taken seriously to promote equality of worth and dignity of all people, to encourage confidence, to be an upstander against racism and dehumanisation. This is another point I made with Raf Epstein, that in fact the fight against anti-Palestinian racism is the fight against Islamophobia, homophobia, anti-Semitism, that together, all of us, quote-unquote, others, all of Peter Dutton's we need to unite and work together. The really disturbing thing within that report was the patterns of these of the anti-Palestinian racism. Also how it reflects through, media pieces that Islam and the Muslims are the problem, and it addresses some of the colonial logic that underlies racism at First Nations people. It problematizes the government's announcements, it speaks to these concepts of the special envoys for anti-Semitism, creating a hierarchy of hate, if you will, that, if you were to look back at the announcement of that anti-Semitism envoy, during NAIDOC week, for our Prime Minister to go, well, we need somebody to look after anti-Semitism. But don't worry, we're going to appoint an Islamophobia person as well. I mean, do we need somebody for Hindus? Somebody for agnostics? What about the Catholics and the Protestants? There should be no hierarchy of hate, no hierarchy of racism. We should all be working together. The report was only for a period of 4 months, and there's 8,900 members in these Facebook groups, and it really is some disturbing read. So we'll put a link to that in the website. Fight against all hate, my friends. Fight against all hate. The fight for Palestine is a fight for a better tomorrow. It's anti-colonial, it's anti-racist. There's no place in the movement for any sort of hate. So make sure you get along, read that report, pass it along to your friends, share the podcast. Make sure you come along tomorrow to the protest, as every Sunday, 12 o'clock at the State Library. We're marching to Parliament House. Get along, got a great lineup of speakers tomorrow, so make sure you get along to that. Tell your friends, share the podcast, and remember, there's never been a better time for a free Palestine.
You've been listening to a 3CR podcast. If you found it valuable, please consider donating or subscribing to support independent community radio. To find out more, go to 3cr.org.au.